All right, so back here on the 1978 Toyota pickup. So last time you saw me trying to fit the wheel and tire package, and saw that it was like definitely poking out, a couple inches away from the fenders. And so what I was looking at here is, there's this sort of indentation, so the fender comes down and then it indents here and then comes out a little bit. And so, like you saw, when it was sitting like a monster truck super high up off the ground, and because there's no engine or trans like weighing down the front of the car, and it's stock suspension, and so it's high. So, I want that definitely like riding lower, and so hopefully, like if I can get just gain a couple inches here, and then get a little bit of a flare on the outside, it'll be enough. And so, what I got to doing on the driver's side here is, that lip, I cut off the lip all the way around, and then, just got my sheet metal pliers and just sort of like slowly went around this. I probably made like 4 or 5 passes, just like bend it a little bit all the way around in order to get sort of a curve that's outward. And so hopefully, I think from like a, gaining enough clearance in order to, cover up the wheel, I could probably do something like this, or if I need to like build out a little bit of like a mini flare, I do think that this will probably work. So I could probably, get this mounted in here, and it was poking out maybe like, 2 inches. And I think that's going to be pretty close here. And then if I do need to kick it out a little bit, I do think that I could do that. So this is just sort of an experiment to see, could I mini flare this fender and, get something that would clear. And so that's like, I think the idea has merit. I definitely think that this is possible. I could even get even a bit more aggressive with the flare if I got my, if I were to use like the shrinker on this in order to get even more of a flare on it. I definitely think that I could. I haven't even tried really pulling the fender much. So I could get like, a 2x4 and pry it on the inside and sort of get more clearance and sort of like pop that fender out even more than it is. So I'm pretty sure that I could get that to work. So that I think it's in a space where I'm not too concerned that after I get that dropped on the ground that I'm going to have a problem with fitment. I think I'm going to be all right. So other things on this fender. So, the thing had been in an accident. And so, the bumper had pressed into this area of the fender. And so I just sort of wire wheeled in order to get an idea of where things were at, and then just use the body hammer and the dolly in order to sort of like straighten that out a little bit. So it was dented in pretty bad right here, and I at this point sort of good enough. I mean, the bumper is going to wrap around it after paint and sanding and filler and everything, and the bumper's behind it. It ain't ever going to be a show car, and I don't really care enough in order to get that perfect. If I did, I'd see if I could buy repop fenders or something, but I don't, so I'm not gonna. Even stuff like this, like maybe I'll see if I can pop that out a little bit, but at the end I'm looking more hot rod than show car, so I'm not too worried about that kind of stuff. Now, one thing that was bad on this fender was that corner piece. This, after wire wheeling it, it was real terrible, but, this started out with a hole in it already. I mean, it was probably about a $50 size hole, and, it was rotted out on the backside as well. And so this definitely had to get replaced. And then you can see the construction there. It's one piece in the front with just a little bit of a lip on the edge that got folded over, and then a second piece laminated over the top, and then this is spot welded between those two pieces, and you can see, where that spot weld is rotted out there. And so, this was a real challenging piece to try to make. I mean, there's lots of compound curves. There's really so many different things going on. But it felt pretty good about the end result. And so got that in there. The way I ended up making it is, instead of having two pieces, I made it in one. And so this outer seam is just, it's just the piece folded over on itself. And so I got one long rectangle, and I completely folded it over itself in order to get that same seam on the outside. And then, just sort of folded down the bottom and everything in order to get that to be, just one piece there. Instead of having it to be two, I wanted to see if I could make it out of one and avoid that same lamination issue that the factory piece had. On the inside here, I haven't done any sort of finish grinding on anything. I'm just, rough fitting everything right now. But that's lining up with this piece real good. I was able to weld all around where the piece that I had to cut out, so that's fine. Drill holes on the bottom in order to get the body mount, the fender mounted onto the body there, and that's all fitting pretty good. And then if we go around, the clearance from that fender to the rocker is also pretty good. So I just got this like little bitty gap here. That's not too bad. And as far as alignment and everything, it looks like that's definitely gonna work. So laid down some weld there, and this, again, I haven't even tried to grind anything on this yet, so we'll have to be careful when I'm grinding this. That's a good butt weld, and I got really good penetration like all the way through on the other side. And so, but at the same time, like, you get to grinding on that and it gets hot, might warp it or mess it up, or whatever. Like, and then this top metal, it's old and thin, and so you got to be careful with when I get to grinding on that. So this piece is pretty tricky. Right here, not real great. Up in this section, that's kind of crappy up in here. So but that was a real tricky piece to make. Going over, so now I think that at this point I'm not going to do any more work on the driver's side fender. I think that it's in a good enough space for me to, focus on something else. But I did need to work on the passenger side. This one here also got hit. You can see there's a crease right here where the bumper had pushed into this fender, and the bumper's bent. I haven't, got to working on the bumper at all, but it creased into this fender here, and then there's dents and all kinds of other stuff. These are not well aligned and everything, and so this is all bent up in here. And then this one, I was able to get this screw in, and then this is not lining up at all. Like, you could see, like, this is that litmus mark there is where it's supposed to be, and it is not even close. And so, that is totally out of alignment here. So this has got a bunch of work to pull. This whole fender needs to get yanked real hard this way. And then there's going to be some pretty gnarly stuff, like this crease here is pretty bad. This is bad up in here. This is not going to be good. Like, there's a bunch of stuff on this side that is pretty bad. And so this is going to take a bunch of work in order to get it even to where I'd feel comfortable, like, cutting it off. Because if I just go to cut this thing off right now and it's all bent, and then I got to bend this piece and bend this piece separate from each other, I'll never get them to fit again. So I got a lot of work to just get that fender straight enough to where I can do the same thing, and I can cut along that lip and pull and do all the stuff that I want to do on this side. A bit more wire wheel work here. So the badge, I took the badge off, and then there was a bunch of rust here. So the badge just gets riveted in. You can see where the rivet holes were, and then water just would set back here and rot it away. You can see a bit of scale on some pieces, but it's actually not that bad. But if we do a comparison, you can see that's what a hole is supposed to be, and then this one is much bigger and it's all wallered out. And so, it was definitely rotting back behind here. And so it was good to do that, to pull that off. And we'll see what my plan is with putting the badges back on. I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing there. Hit some wire wheel on some other spots just to see if these turn into anything bad. So far, not bad. This, again, is just a trim piece. That's okay. And then, shit, happened again. So, this side, insanely, I just had like one little dot like this was right here. So a dot about that size is where I saw this. And as soon as I hit it with the wire wheel, that stupid thing just exploded. And so, I mean, this is obviously terrible. I mean, that metal is trash. And so, man, I'll have to do the same thing as I did on the other side. And that piece took me a long time to make. And so, I'll have to do it again. Unfortunately, I'll have to cut, a whole section out. I'll probably come all the way up to here. You can see there's a little bit of scaling. And I figure if I cut along here is like the best metal that I'm going to have. Cut along all that. I want to have the fender to be separate, and so yeah, that's going to be a pain in the ass to make another one of these. So yeah, that's where we're sitting. I'm not going to record that because it's such a horrible experience. So I think, at least initially, I'm going to try to get this fender pounded out a bit in order to get some of the dents and the dings and everything out of it before I start cutting. So, if I go replace that piece over there and, get it all made and all that other stuff, and then I got to do a bunch of banging and then, bending on those brand new fresh welds, and then they crack or, anything else. Like it's, the MIG welds don't bend real well. They're hard. Like the metal gets really work hardened like after you weld it, and it is stiff and thick, and like you don't want to be bending weld. Like it ain't gonna turn out well. And so, since I do have some other bending and stuff to do on this fender, I'm not cutting that out until I get all this other bending done. So while the metal is old and thin and malleable, like I'll go through and get it as, as tied up as I can, and then procrastinate on doing that because that shit sucks. So, all right, so that's about it. It's come a long way. The fact that I'm even in a space where I'm putting the fenders on it is kind of exciting. And then we'll be able to pick up that suspension system next week. So, hopefully here we'll have a video with doing some suspension crap. All right, cool. Thanks. Catch you on the next one.